Now let's go to the next block. We will be talking about the challenges on infrastructure for the efficient use of water. So, providing what Mario already settled, I think it's a great movement to the discussion. So, I invite Paola Gordon Luna to take the floor, as well as Antonio Esquel Robles, and we have online two speakers, Gonzalo Merediz Alonso, and our moderator, that I will be introducing her, as well as the other participants. Gloria Soto Montes de Oca is a professor and researcher from the Social Science Department in Universidad Metropolitana in Coajimalpa, honorary researcher of the Center for Social and Economic Research on the Global Environment from UK. He has a PhD on the University of UK, a master's on international relations as from UK, and a degree on international degrees by Universidad Iberoamericana here in Mexico City. She is a member of the National Center of Researchers. She has been head of different public policy projects like the National Commission of Water and the Climate Change Commission, the Procurement Office in Environment, and Territory Procurement, among others. So nice to meet you all. Thank you, Gloria and Gonzalo, for being here online. We can see that we have 60 participants online at Zoom. Thank you very much, and I pass the floor to you. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I greet you from UK. I'm taking a hiatus over here, and it is great to participate virtually here. I thank you to all the organizers, to Pronatura and the European Union for inviting me as a moderator in this panel regarding challenges on the infrastructure management for the efficient usage of water. The objective of this panel is to address solutions in order to optimize the infrastructure management regarding water, nationally speaking. Taking as an example the basins that we are taking into study. And for me, it's a pleasure because I see the panel speakers that we have in this table that I will introduce them as well. But just before that, I would like to give a brief introduction that I think with the presentation that Mario made, well, now I think all of these topics are connected. Saying that adapting to climate change supposedly to understand it to the topics that we're exposed to in every background, in every context, which they can be associated to changes on the patterns of precipitation, to extreme events like dryness, floodings, heat waves, fires, and all these risks have consequences on the management of water in all their different usages. When we talk about water management, we need to think about that water management will impact on the domestic use, on the agriculture, on the industrial use, and in the use for maintaining healthy ecosystems. Just a few times we get to worried thinking about what's happening when the ecosystems, when there's climate change or when there are risk factors. And I think we also have to think about the ecosystems and in the risk that we have in these places. So regarding this topic, on the infrastructure, we're supposed to consider the infrastructure that is relevant for each type of risk where they are exposed to in each region, and that these planning processes on infrastructure, they need to have this vision about the local context, which I think is what they're gonna present today, and that definitely in a context like Mexico, that it's so diverse, it's very important to get to know it. What are the characteristics, the regional characteristics, where they get to be relevant for this topic? The infrastructure has to consider not only issues regarding construction, but also its operation and maintenance and efficient maintenance. That is what Mario was mentioning a moment ago. This step is also connected to the mitigation of climate change because there's this link between water efficiency and environment. Infrastructure has to aspire to reduce the negative effects, collateral effects of its operation, of its construction, including emissions of emissions of greenhouse effect. Because when infrastructure is developed, water infrastructure, there is also an impact, negative impact, some external impacts that have to be taken into account. That's why the relevance of the solution based on nature, because in several cases, what we could have here are the co-benefits that these solutions may have based on nature. The infrastructure management, there are different options. The solutions on engineering or structure options, most known as gray infrastructure, nature-based solutions, or ecosystem-based solutions. And here I would like to take the opportunity to highlight this point that has just been talked, that it is a mistake to think that infrastructure does not recognize that water is a natural resource and that we not only need infrastructure, but that we need to have and we need to be aware that water comes from the ecosystems and that as the ecosystems are in good conditions, we will be able to have better availability and quality of this resource. So this connection between the ecosystems and infrastructure has to be something that is present on the plans for infrastructure. In terms of governance, it is necessary on the coordination of different government levels where skills are fundamental. The social infrastructure with beings and supposing the leadership of the federal authorities and on the supply systems for water for urban system on the residual water treatment, it is very important to improve the capacities of the municipal authorities with the state authorities and even more with the support of the federal authorities. And here is when we need to talk about financing. In financing, it should be important to see in this table, I mean, what our speakers will talk about regarding finance, about some cases of success for financing, about how to operate efficiently with infrastructure. Here, the charges for water and the charging systems play a very important role in order to improve the real capacities to develop and maintain the infrastructure, considering, of course, criteria for equity, because we know that in such an heterogeneous country where half of the population and in poverty conditions, equity and the capacity of payment of certain segments in the population, it is important that other users of water that do have this capacity to pay, and that I think is a topic that hasn't been discussed enough about what is needed to support this infrastructure. In the interventions of the speakers, there will be for sure some aspects of these topics about what is the infrastructure existing on the different basins, which one needs to be more efficient, which one needs to be existing, but it needs to be improved in its operation. and what other infrastructure is necessary to improve resiliency of the basins to be an object of study. So, without further ado, I would like to start with the presentation. Before we start, I would like to tell to our speakers that I'll ask you to take about 7 to 10 minutes for your presentations, and 2 minutes, I will tell you that time is running out. And if we continue with these times, I think there will be enough time for questions for Q&A. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Paola Cordon Luna. Thank you very much, Paola, to be in this panel. I have the privilege to introduce you. I will make a small biography about you. Paola Gordon Luna is a specialist in water with more than 10 years of experience in projects related to integrated solution of water resources, innovation, water footprint, and adaptation to climate change, technical strengthening and management on the supply service for the water. Currently, she's the director of the water program on Pronatura Mexico. She's part of the technical ministry of water for Latin America and Caribbean. She has a degree on biology in Panama, master's on management of natural resources by Universidad de Guadalajara, project manager she's a candidate of the water management on business by the Tecnológico de Monterrey. On Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, she provides technical support on financing mechanisms to governments looking for improving their efficiency. She was also responsible for the coordination of the water network for Latin America and Caribbean in Tecnológico de Monterrey and also on the Water Youth Program in Stockholm. She has also been supported with the USAID, with the World Bank and the Foundation Villagronte and the National Foundation on Development. So, thank you very much, Paola. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Gloria, for this wonderful introduction. Good morning to everyone in this auditorium. I am Paola Gordon. I am the Director of Water in Pronatura, Mexico, and I am pleased to be here with you sharing this dialogue because this is what we want to achieve with Pronatura, to have a dialogue on these relevant things, especially right now for this country that is going through a severe drought and all of this heat that is affecting a lot of our resources. I am very pleased to talk about communication as well, and Mario also talked about it. One of the main challenges for the management of water infrastructure is language. We speak different languages because we come from different sectors, academic, social backgrounds, and sometimes we do not understand each other. We don't know what we are talking about. And water is so cross-cutting. It has so many different users, agricultural, industrial, as domestic consumers as well. And by having this diversity of users, sometimes we don't refer to the same things in the same way. So in order to encourage these dialogues, we need to understand what we are talking about. So in that sense, so we need to see what we understand as hydric or water infrastructure. Depending on who makes this concept, but CEPAL defines this water infrastructure as a set of work and equipment necessary for getting, storing, driving, treating, and distributing water, as well as the management of residual water and their reuse, with the purpose of satisfying the needs for different human, industrial, and environmental uses. I highlight that CEPAL has included industrial use as part of the water infrastructure. In the case of the WHO, we define water infrastructure as all the facilities systems designed for the supply of drinking water, sanitation, and management of residual water essential to guarantee public health and the protection of the environment. The WHO also includes the environment here. So we see a use and the different needs for human use and environmental as well as industrial, but also public health, but we should not forget the environment and nature. So in order to understand what we are talking about, I have included some slides that talk about the classification of water infrastructure so we understand what we are referring to. We have to remember that not necessarily all of those in this room and all the community, not everyone works in the water sector. Sometimes they don't know what we mean with this infrastructure. This infrastructure can be classified through the way it is used, the function, the type of water. And if we focus on function, we refer to water infrastructure for the supply of drinking water, for sanitation and treatment of residual water, for the control of flood management and regulation of water, and also for hydroelectric production. If we talk about the infrastructure by type of water, we can think about infrastructure related to superficial water, water from the rain, and residual water. We also have another important classification by the nature of the infrastructure that can be divided by physical or management infrastructure. Physical infrastructure is the gray or green infrastructure. I don't know if you know about it. When we talk about gray, it means to the large construction works for providing all of these services that I just mentioned. But when we talk about green infrastructure, and sometimes we refer to them as solutions based on nature, it's when we use the ecosystems and the function of the natural ecosystems to carry out these water services. For example, in this image on the top, we see the gray infrastructure, which is the Cutzamala system. And on the bottom, we refer to these dams, natural dams made with land, so they can comply with this function of retaining water, controlling flood, and also we talk about yes, can we go back to that one? That one. So when we talk about management infrastructure, we don't talk about this very often because we refer to technologies for monitoring water resources. And this is like the purpose that we have on the long term to manage more efficiently the infrastructure systems. How can we monitor remotely the function? How can we foresee the needs of maintenance when they are obsolete, when the infrastructure has been damaged? How can we take advantage of all of this technological infrastructure to guarantee this functioning of the infrastructure? Another type of classification is by scale. We have regional infrastructure, the urban infrastructure, it needs to attend a growing population that is in a specific territory. Sometimes this water infrastructure needs to come from a plan for building a water-specific infrastructure. When we talk about rural infrastructure, it's smaller because the population is more dispersed. Sometimes it's not sustainable economically, and that's why it has a different scale of infrastructure. And the regional infrastructure, sometimes we don't mention it, but here in the basin of Cutzamala, it's particularly important because we have a regional infrastructure that includes Michoacán, Mexico City, we have 6 basins, we have 7 dams. So it's not just specific to one territory like the urban case or the dispersed populations. We have also water coming from other basins. The use, it could be domestic, industrial, agricultural, recreational, or by technology, it's traditional or advanced. And I'm going to go faster because otherwise I won't have enough time. Dr. Escolero and his researchers in the Autonomous University of Mexico analyzed the challenges in the Cutzamala River Basin. They found that there are factors that affect the volume of the sources, also in storage, problems in the working in one or more components, errors in the measurements, clandestine extraction, and there are changes in the demand as well. They also identified problems that can be a conflict among users. There are disputes for water in these regions. These waterfalls are being sold. There's a scarcity of water. There's serious problems in different localities because the water of the state is going to Mexico City, and many municipalities are staying without water in this region. We have also different issues related to the water pollution, residual water coming from aquaculture, solid residue, and the erosion of the soil. Solid waste, if you haven't had the chance to see where the water from Mexico City end up in, I invite you to do it because this is a serious situation. The population, not only from the sources, but where is residual water going to? I think that is relevant for society. It should be. The challenges related to Cutzamala that were sorry, Paola, you only have 1 minute. Okay, I won't have time. There are high rates of erosion, pollution sources. There's conflict because of the lack of infrastructure, a lot of floods due to problems with the demand infrastructure that is like 55 or 60 years of working. If you don't provide proper maintenance, then it's obviously presenting issues. There's more than 20% of issues there. I consult that the number is right now is 27%. It's critical. In just a few weeks, Cutzamala won't be operational, and that has a lot of implications. However, the challenges that we have seen in the Valley of Mexico, the floods, we forget that the water scarcity right now, it's a problem. This is a video. Can you please play it? This video is from the Sierra of Guadalupe, the urban pressure on these recharge zones. And this is when we talk about communication. If the people do not know what the importance of protecting these areas, then we cannot do much because practically they need to set like walls and police officers, so this urban footprint is not growing even more. It becomes more complicated. It's a really hard conflict. And well, in the conversation, we can discuss the social, environmental, economical, technical, and political challenges that this implies. To wrap up, how can we redesign the planning or the infrastructure in an intelligent way and enjoy more inhabitable surroundings in synergy with the environment? We need to change our mindset to build more drainage, more systems to channel all of this. This was done when the Spaniards came because it was a problem in the Valley of Mexico. Residual water management to develop green infrastructure rain gardens, permeable soil that will allow the filtration of water and improving the quality of the water. Instead of extracting more from the underground aquifers that are overexploited, and now that they are pressuring more on the wells, promoting rainfall, we should have policies for these new constructions in the Valley of Mexico and also in the state of Mexico to follow certain regulations to take advantage of the rain water. There's a high volume of rain that could be used instead of wasting it. It's important to leave some of that water for the natural ecosystems. Now that they talk about the circular economy, it's not just using water and reusing it, but to leave it also for the ecosystem. Implementing solution based on nature. We can expand more about that. Creating more parks and recreational places. The trend in Europe, we have seen that there are a lot of parks that have a multiple function. They do not just help with the recreation of the population, but they become storage areas and for flooding control, and it's a way of adapting to climate change. And finally, a combination of gray infrastructure with green infrastructure. This will help us be more resilient because we cannot depend exclusively on green infrastructure. We need a combination of gray and green infrastructures to approach these different issues and find to educate the community in practices of conservation, not just for saving water. I've had the chance to live in many countries, and the culture in Mexico, we have been living with water scarcity, and the consumption of water is not so high as in other countries. The population, due to the need, they have been used to not living with enough water, but we have to be creative so we can give them more tools so they can know beyond just saving water when they are brushing their teeth or taking a shower, how can they preserve water in different ways? And using this circular economy concept, and in terms of policies, the policies should be integrated. There are some programs that use the water from the network, so they have to be comprehensive programs considering all aspects of the water system. And with this, I finish, and we can continue with the discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Paola. Sorry for the pressure. Your presentation was very interesting. I think you leave clear the different actions and different areas that are part of the infrastructure and the different actions that can be taken in the case of the basin of Guatemala, and also the complexity. Because water management is telling us that it's not truly something from the water authorities. Because of all of these recommendations that you mentioned, we see engagement of different authorities related to urban development, evidently with the conservation and the planning. There's no doubt that all of these has an impact in water management in a context like Mexico City and the Valley. It's very complex, but it also opens up new opportunities. Now I will present our second panelist, Gonzalo Merediz Alonso. He's a biologist. He studied at UNAM. He has a master's degree in environmental biology by the State University of New York. Since 1992, he has been working on conservation and sustainable use of natural resources in Canada. with friends of Sian. He has been working in the study of populational ecology of different species of animals like crocodiles. He has been working with rural communities, Mayan communities in the development of productive projects and for environmental education. He was a leader of different protected areas, almost 200,000 hectares. He has promoted other uh, programs. He has participated in the design of financing, implementation, and surveillance of different projects on sustainable development, conservation, and climate change. And since 2006, he has been the executive director of Amigos de Sian and president of the Yucatán Peninsula Basin Council and the State Council of the Natural Protected Areas. Please, Gonzalo, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Gloria. Muy buenas tardes.
Thank you very much, Gloria.
Buenos días por allá.
Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you to Pronatura for inviting me in this session and giving me the chance to share our perspective from the Peninsula of Yucatan. And thank you to the EU for these spaces. I think my screen is very small. I don't see the full presentation. If you help me with the next one. I cannot see the full slide.
Bueno, pues voy a empezar dando un contexto aquí.
I'm going to start by giving some context of the Peninsula of Yucatan. A lot of the information that I will be sharing comes from this project from the Peninsula of Yucatan that was published by the Council of the Basin a couple of years ago with the leadership of CONAGUA and also from Friends of Sian.
¿Me pasan la que sigue?
Next one, please.
¿O no gustan que lo transmita desde aquí?
Or do you want me to share the presentation myself? If you want, you can share yourself.
Si me dejan,
can I share?
Por favor.
You can share now.
Muy bien. ¿Sí se ve?
Can you see it? Yes.
Gracias. Les comentaba,
so I was saying I'm going to give you some context based on the findings of this program. The peninsula is famous for having a lot of water, and yes, we do have a lot of underground water. But as we can see, the situation is not necessarily going to be like that forever. So it's important that we start thinking, and not just thinking, but acting on different alternatives, technological alternatives in order to manage water in the region. And basically, an important part of this program was the analysis done on climate change and some scenarios possibly the most realistic one, and I hope that we are wrong, but probably this will happen by 2050. We're going to have a temperature increase in the peninsula. Rain will be reduced, droughts will be larger, and this will reduce the recharge of the aquifers, and also the population will grow, touristic industries will grow, residential will grow significantly in the peninsula, so the demand for water will be greater. Are we looking at another slide? I don't know which one you're explaining. Can you see it? Yes.
Bueno, entonces hablaba de los cambios en
So I was talking about the
que
changes in
la cascada.
temperature.
Y pues, como sabemos, el nivel del mar
And
está
as we
subiendo.
know, the sea level is rising.
Algunos estudios que
We
se
can
pudieron
see
tener en el
some
Consejo Regional de cómo
studies.
el aumento en el nivel del mar va a
The
generar
increase in
cambios
sea
en la
level
salinidad
will
en las costas de la
also
península
alter
y
other
también
things in the
alterar
peninsula,
la salinización de los
salinization
acuíferos. Si
of the
sumamos todo esto,
aquifers.
pues vamos a
And if
tener
we consider
una
all of this,
disminución
we're gonna
importante
have a
en las zonas
decrease,
costeras, las zonas más pobladas,
especially on
de
the
la
coastal
disponibilidad del
zone
agua
and
que
most
vamos a tener
populated
en
zones of the
la
availability
región.
of
Esto nos pone
water in the
un
region.
reto que tenemos que empezar a
This
actuar
implies a
desde ahora.
challenge that we need to tackle from now.
Y bueno, voy a darles un par de ejemplos
And I'm going to give you a couple of
de,
examples
de lo que se está haciendo aquí en la región
of what is
por
being done here in the
perspectiva de
region from
de
the
amigos de Sian
perspective of Amigos de
para
Sian,
ir preparándonos para
so
ese
we can
futuro.
be
Uno
prepared
muy
for that
importante es el
future.
cambio de paradigma
Something important is a
de los ríos
paradigm change.
en la región. Aquí antiguamente el agua de lluvia
Before,
era un elemento muy importante
rainwater was really
de
important
abasto para la
for
población,
that supply and the
subterráneamente para
population.
la captación
Underground water
de carbonatos de calcio,
had a
entre
lot
otros.
of
Es una molécula muy
calcium
dura. Y el agua de lluvia pues,
carbonate,
tiene
and
muchos
it was
carbonatos de buena
really
calidad. Entonces aquí
hard,
hubo
and
un cambio
rainwater had a
de
better
captación y
quality.
almacenamiento
So
del
there
agua
was
de
this
lluvia y
culture
construcción de la
with the
tubería,
vision
del tinaco, de las bombas,
of the
etcétera, se fue perdiendo,
bombs and everything.
se
It got
considera.
lost.
Gonzalo, perdón, nada más si puedes poner tu presentación
Can you set your presentation
completa
in
porque
presentation mode?
no está en modo presentación.
Because it is not.
Ay, es que si lo hago así, a ver, déjenme, perdón, déjenme salir. A ver ahora.
What about now?
Ahora falta compartir pantalla.
You need to share it.
Ahora sí se ve. ¿Ahora se ve?
Se ve
Now
igual.
Y ahí
it's
mismo
the same.
le puedes poner donde aparece como una copita en la esquina inferior derecha. Y
On
ahí
the
pon
lower
presentar
right,
y ya
you
te
can
va a
enter
abrir.
presentation mode.
Pues sí es lo que he hecho, pero no.
That's what I did.
Ok, igual podemos continuar así.
Well, we can continue like this.
Igual
Bueno,
podemos continuar, sí, gracias.
así se ve
Thank
la
you.
diapositiva por lo menos.
But you can see the slide,
Sí, sí
right?
se ve.
Bueno,
Yes,
perdón.
yes.
Entonces, bueno, les comentaba, pues
Okay, so I was saying that
retomando con las comunidades
we're working with
el proceso
the
de captación de agua de
communities
lluvia.
on this
Estamos
culture
trabajando
on
ya en la
recovering
implementación de
rainwater. We're
redes
working on
ahí
the implementation of
comunitarias en la que se
water
atiende
governance in the
situaciones para
communities
la captación de agua, el almacenamiento, pero
for
también para el
capturing
tratamiento de las
water,
aguas
for
residuales.
storing it, and also for
Estamos
treating water.
contribuyendo a
We are
facilitar el acceso
contributing
al agua
to
a
facilitate
esas
the
comunidades más
access of
aisladas,
water for the isolated
las de mayor
communities,
pobreza.
those that have
Estamos
most
también contribuyendo a
poverty
reducir
levels, and we are
la polución del
contributing,
agua.
reducing
Esta
water
gobernanza
pollution.
basada en la
This
cultura ecológica
governance based on
acompañada de la
ecotechnias
creación en las
is
comunidades de estructuras
accompanied by the
para
creation
tomar
of
decisiones
structures for
ambientales,
decision making on a
educación
community
ambiental,
level, environmental education, a very intense
control
program
ciudadano de la calidad
for
del agua.
education and the citizen monitoring on water
En este
quality.
QR
In
pueden
this
ver
QR code, you can
los
download
materiales, las
the
publicaciones que
different
utilizamos.
materials and
Tenemos definido este
publications
esquema de
where we
gobernanza
define this
en
governance scheme that we are
Montes de
applying
Yucatán.
in the region
Esto
of
según
the
Amigos en Campo,
Peninsula.
hay otras organizaciones
This is Amigos de Sian,
como
but
para la
there
Paz
are
Oceánica, en
other
fin, muchas organizaciones están
communities and
implementando
organizations that are implementing
parecidas para justamente ayudar a
strategies
las
as well
comunidades a adaptarse
to help
a los
communities
problemas
adapt to the possible
generados por el cambio climático y la
problems
falta de
of
disponibilidad de agua
climate
en un futuro.
change and the lack of water availability. These are the areas that are working together with the communities. We have enough water, and we're gonna have to guarantee the supply. Fortunately, we have enough resources so we can solve maybe not 100%, but a large percentage on the needs of water for the communities, for the daily life in these communities. And the most important part is that the monitoring, environmental education, the community work to give viability. It's not an infrastructure project, but it's more about the governance to face these challenges of climate change, difficulties to get access to groundwater is important. And this has to do with nature as well, with adaptation to climate change, the infrastructure. In the region, we have some fractures here, important fractures. You can see them very clearly on this image from NASA. When it touches a mantle, we see a lot of products here. These structures on the coastal region, these wetlands are being destroyed. This affects the health of the ecosystem and the capacity of the wetlands to filter residual water and wastewater in the region. And it enables flooding, the loss of infrastructure. We see an image after Wilma's hurricane almost 20 years ago. I see the highway from Merida. It is not well designed, so it left us isolated for many days. And Cancun was left with no communication. We were completely isolated for many days. And it is very common. Gonzalo, you only have 1 minute. We see that if you build highways in an inadequate way that flows year after year, will destroy the highway, where you put people under risk, and there's a promotion of flood because the highways work as dams. And here we can see how these pathways affect mangroves in the Sian reserve 50 years ago. This was open, and you have to be investing a lot of money and effort for restoring these wetlands and to recover these services that will allow us to adapt to climate change. So to wrap up, we just published a manual for good practices for the construction of paths in wetlands and to reduce the impact on the water resources, biodiversity, and the safety of people. This QR code, you can download this manual, you can use it and help promote it. We have a lot of work in terms of water quality, different tools to guide investors for building treatment plants that are adequate for this region, training people, and to generate a surrounding that will allow us to reduce water issues in the future, but also to improve the quality of the ecosystem. And another manual that we have with the Nature Conservancy in Chetumal, a manual for good practices for improving the infrastructure, not just water infrastructure, but the coastal infrastructure to face climate change challenges that are a lot in this region. Thank you. This is work that has had the support of many institutions, and I want to thank you please visit our website. You have a virtual library there where you can download all of these publications that can be useful for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. We are a little bit short in time. I would like to introduce Antonio Robles, that is our third speaker today, so we can have some time for some Q&A. So, Antonio, please take 8 minutes for your presentation so we can be okay with the time. Antonio, he has a degree on ecology. She's in charge of ecosystems and facilitator and compiler of the conservation program of the Yaqui River Basin. He's the regional coordinator currently for Sonora in PROFAUNA. And there are projects for restoration and conservation in the promotion of water and better production practices. Thank you, Antonio. So please go ahead. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I know that we are in preparation of this event, and I was checking the water plan for Sonora to see what could I find and to see the program with climate change. And coincidentally, as Dr. Torres was mentioning, all the infrastructure is focused on the low part of the basin, of where in the agricultural fields, on the Yaqui field, and it's not well mentioned about the rest of the basin. The water plan is mentioned, the support infrastructure for agriculture, I mean, for batteries, for water conduction for agriculture, and only that. And also watersheds for taking water from one place to another, and with the plan for justice in the Yaqui and for the water supply and for healing. So that's in general. And 2 weeks ago, on the environment, world environment of political campaigns, we were talking with the mayor of Hermosillo, and we were saying that Hermosillo is in the basin of Sonora, but now it's part of the Yaqui River Basin because we have a watershed that passes water from one of the more important dams to another one to complement to the city. And talking with him, and we were saying that there's an option that for PROFAUNA, I'm not gonna talk about the basin, and I will talk about Saltillo, because the PROFAUNA there has been working with the Water Foundation in Saltillo based on, or well, within the framework of this initiative for the conservation of nature in Mexico. So what I want to, I mean, we already know about the basins and climate change and all about the digital coverage. I think we already know this information. We've already seen it. We have talked about it in detail, and given the short time that we have, I want to talk about this initiative of basins and cities that it's among a lot of cities in the country. And basically what it does is try to generate initiatives or actions that are related to the conservation at the level of the basins. But within these projects, a part of it is related to the creation of water funding. That is what we were talking a moment ago. And I think Colima, Monterrey, and Jalapa are the ones that have started with a water fund, but not all of them have worked correctly. And we will talk about the reasons why. So in the case of Saltillo, basically Saltillo has a mountain line that it's a mountain line on the side that in 1996 it was established as a protected nature area. And the government of Coahuila passes the administration of this nature area. And from 2002, PROFAUNA is registered on this program of cities and started working on different projects. And in 2005, they started with the voluntary collection program with the water bodies in Saltillo. At the beginning, this worked taking projects to the basin on the high part. I mean, restoration, management, surveillance, all these kind of actions. And during the last years, we have been migrating this to more resilient cities to work on this. We were also mentioning about the infrastructure, incorporating green infrastructure, everything that you mentioned a moment ago, but taking care of the high parts as well and how they operate with the water fund. I mean, so this program has different strategic lines. As they were saying, that there's a strategy program with sensibilization and communication that fosters citizenship participation and coordination between institutions that work with different key sectors in the government. There's also a financing strategy that guarantees the integral management. There's also what we're saying about the field actions and the knowledge community that is more related to promote where the water comes from. There's an inscription strategy with citizens to be incorporated for the payment. It's voluntary. And how it works with the donors is that on the first instance, the users that are registered, but also there can be companies or other entities that would like to cooperate. The one receiving the funds is Agua de Saltillo. It's transferred to PROFAUNA that manages in one single account. And the most important thing is that it's regulated by consultation council that are the ones accepting and approving the budget and the annual program. It has supervision on the actions, and there's a revision on the report as well. So currently, it has 32 projects on operation with this project. And the interesting thing here is that compared to the ones that haven't worked correctly, our director, Sergio Marínez, said, one detail with the government is that when they see the transfer of funds and they're taking them in this case to PROFAUNA or to any other entity, they don't like that quite. They don't quite like that. So the case is that when the success cases that are working is that it can be a group or a funding program along with the government entity, but not the government alone when it has been operating with these initiatives in other places. That's a lesson learned in this point. And the achievements so far are related to that the strategy is more focused on communication and it has worked correctly. There's a committee consolidated. There's a mechanism for citizenship collection that is very efficient. There are management plans for 5 years for the operations of the basin, and there's a technical team on this nature protected area and first responders for fire. And from 2002 up to present in this dam, there was the risk, right? The intermittent financing of the operation of the water and the users. Less than 5% of the population knew where water came from. And in 2020, 57% of this mountain line, it's under protection, conservation, and handling. There's a scheme for financing in a long term. It is a private-public model for collecting with the group of Agua de Saltillo and PROFAUNA and other private entities. And now more than 80% of the population knows that water comes from Sierra Zapanamé and they value its importance.
Perdón, un par de minutos, por favor. Perfecto.
I'm ready if I have 2 minutes. I will donate those 2 minutes that I have left.
Muchas gracias, Antonio. Mira,
Thank you very much, Antonio. And you gave us the opportunity to.
Va a haber seguramente muchas preguntas.
There will be a lot of questions for sure, and probably we won't be able to answer all of them. But I don't know if we have enough time for covering a couple of questions. I'll ask our organizers, two questions.
Adelante. ¿Alguien me ayuda con eso?
Somebody can help me with that? Very interesting. This model of Saltillo, how can it be replied in other parts of the country? Because it's amazing what you have achieved. And because I've been hearing this for years and we always refer to Saltillo, but when the rest of the countries will do that? I have the same question actually, but and when they have using this with the mayor of the city, I've mentioned that there are opportunities in clean energies and parks and everything related to green infrastructure. So we leave this possibility open that we need to approach to our decision model, to the ones operating the local organizers, and to send the message that we're generating here, that because we are talking about and we are looking at this, at the model, that we are experiencing it, and we don't have enough time now to think about if we like it or not, if we agree. I think that we need to work and convince, not even sensibilize, but convince the decision makers to take this model, and that there are models that, if they can work as an example of what works and what doesn't work. I'm Alejandra Lopez. I'm Director of Water and Climate in TNC, Nature Conservancy for Mexico. And I would like to thank Pronatura because we have a very important alliance in this basin in Valle Mexico and other ones. My question is about the participation of the private sector, because I think that we have talked a lot about the role of people and communities. But I think that this case in Saltillo and other water fundings that we have helped to foster to improve these mechanisms in Mexico City, Monterrey, and other parts of the country. It is an interesting case of the mobilization of resources of the private sector and other for the restoration of the main areas for recharge and for the protection of ecosystem in high basins. And I think that the case of Saltillo, what Saltillo has, and that's quite admirable, is this alliance with the private sector and with the local authorities, which I think it's a model that I agree should be very important to copy it in other parts. So my question is a little bit open for the participation of involving the private sector. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alejandro, for this question. Definitely, there are the participation of the private sector. We are living a moment of change where the companies are not only concerned about reducing or compensating the environment damages or the negative impacts that its operations may have, that we are experiencing, but we are experiencing a change in the mindset regarding reducing or compensating, or how we can help them to regenerate natural ecosystems. And that's a very significant change, a very radical change. The ones that work with the environment, we have been looking for years, and finally we are seeing those results. This change in the mindset happened from with all this media pressure and social pressure, and in the comprehension of the private sector that not attending this represents a risk on its operations. So in order to transmit this message in a better way and to measure how this can be a risk in its operations when they start affecting its pocket, that's when by convincing, and that's how they convince by the earnings that they stop earning. But it's not only about the great companies or how they can start working with the pymes. We need to strengthen the medium-sized companies, the startups that, of course, they don't have the income to focus them on these processes. But how can we support them so from its origin, from its conception, they can have environment practices that are friendly with nature? Also, there are these mechanisms for investment, the water funds, as we already know, have been very successful in different parts of Latin America, but also identifying other mechanisms for financing that can not only be through nations that are very welcomed, very necessary, but also financing mechanisms that can support the public associations and private associations to develop this kind of green infrastructure and to foster as well and to demand with the authorities that if we all have a role, we need to convince the authorities, but it's not only about that, it's also to demand them to attend these problems because we cannot only keep working this way. And to leverage all these financial mechanisms, you have mentioned one some of them that I was able to use private as I understand. So it's not applicable like the rest of the countries because the operation mechanism it's private. So we need to identify other mechanisms for compensating somehow or for channeling the financial resources for the management of these works, and not to only be as something beneficial or parallel, but that can be within the program of policies and institutions to perform this kind of infrastructures that can contribute to resiliency. Because as it's mentioned, we don't have enough time. We're running out of time. We need to do it, or we're all going to be affected, but the people that will be affected the most, it will be the most vulnerable population, as we already seen. Also, that I think they're all in a fashion of replenish, right? Of looking for, and there's Coca-Cola, and there's even a commercial, I think, with the Constellation brands that has a brewing plant in Ciudad Obregón. I saw a TV advertisement that they have Carcamo and they are recovering a certain amount of water and that they are doing it right. I mean, what I'm saying is that they are all isolated efforts. They are on their own thing and they are making decisions in their own way. So I think the thing is to identify all these actors that are doing things and trying to add them and to maybe not align, but to invite them to get into this ship. You know, if there are plans that some of them have made or that are part of a common strategy, and to see that if they're going to invest, maybe I will invite you to participate in this plan, right? And not only to be disconnected efforts. I would like to give a small description of residual waters here in Quintana Roo. After several years of this registration, several plants, public plants, are covering the nutrients that are the main contaminants here in the region. The implementation of the NOM 001 was very good received. It's motivating the hotels and in a very high opening in this correct process and to see how they can improve. So I think that the private initiative it's taking a very significant role in order to reduce a problem in population in pollution, adding the problems that I established at the beginning about availability in the future and the present in the Peninsula of Yucatán. Well, I think we are very short on time with this panel. One of the most interesting things that I have seen, I would like to thank our three speakers, Paola Gordon, Gonzalo Merediz, and Antonio Esquer. Great presentations. I think that we have a lot of material here to give to the subnational and different actors and the subnational governments regarding this topic. Thank you very much for allowing me to be a moderator in this panel, and I greet you from here. Thank you very much.